Hello everyone, I'll be discussing the Article 120 of the Revised Penal Code. Under Article 120, it is the correspondence with hostile country. So within this article, we have to define those words. So first is the correspondence. Correspondence is the communication by means of letters, or it may refer to the letters which pass between those who have friendly or business relations. So hostile means adverse or showing ill will or a desire to harm, or it can uh, mean antagonistic or unfriendly. So in Article 120, correspondence with hostile country, I highlighted some important terms or phrases that should be familiarized with or memorized here in this article. So here, any person who in time of war shall have correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops shall be punished by prison correctional if the correspondence has been prohibited by government. Second, by prison mayor if such correspondence be carried on ciphers or conventional signs. And lastly, by reclusion temporal, if notice or information be given thereby which might be useful to the enemy, if the offender intended to aid the enemy by giving such notice or information, he shall suffer the penalty of reclusion temporal to death. So, what are the elements of this article? So memorize the acronyms WPC, WC-PCU, WC-PCU. Why W? You have to remember that the first element is that it is in time of war in which the Philippines is involved. Second, that the offender makes correspondence with an enemy country or territory occupied by enemy troops. P, because first, that the correspondence is either prohibited by the government, or second, carried on ciphers or conventional signs, or lastly, containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy. So that is the meaning of the WCPCU. In time of war, correspondence with an enemy country or territory, prohibited by the government, ciphers or conventional signs, and useful to the enemy. So cipher means the secret code or messages, that is the ciphers. So let's further explain those three. First, the prohibited by the government. Here, the correspondence is in whatever form, such as by mail, radio, testing, or by email. Any correspondence, any form will do. Second, carried on ciphers or conventional signs. So, if ciphers were used, there is no need for prohibition by the government to consummate the crime. So, liable na kahit hindi na kailangan ng prohibition ng government. And if ciphers were not used, there is need for prohibition of the government. And lastly, containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy. So note that even if the correspondence, mailman yan, or anything by radio or such, if the correspondence contains innocent matters, even if the correspondence has been prohibited by the government, it is still punishable. It is still punishable. Okay? Next. So, what are those circumstances qualifying the offense? The following must concord together. Concord together. Dapat, yeah, concord. They must concord together, okay? So, first, that the notice or information might be useful to the enemy. Useful to the enemy. Remember that. Next, that the offender intended to aid the enemy. The offender really has the intention to aid the enemy. First, that the notice or information might be useful to the enemy. Second, that the offender intended to aid the enemy. So I made a table for easy reference, to easy memorize also, and to familiarize. You can even take a screenshot of it because it is like based on my, it is important. This is based on my understanding of this article. So I summarize it with two columns, the elements and the penalty, and then you can see the elements with its corresponding penalties. So the elements 1, 2, 3, including the A of number 3, the penalty is prison correctional, which is 6 months and 1 day to 6 years. And the carried on ciphers or conventional signs is prison mayor, 6 years and 1 day to 12 years. And lastly, the containing notice or information which might be useful to the enemy is of dalawa yung kanyang there are two penalties for it in two different circumstances. Reclusion temporal 12 years and 1 day to 20 years if the information may be useful to the enemy. However, it will be reclusion temporal to death if the intention was to aid the enemy. So that will be all. Thank you for listening.